Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Candid with Candia podcast. We're really excited. This has definitely been something that's been in the works for a really long time. In this first episode, I want to go into my background. I want to go into the goals that we have for the podcast. There's a lot of things that went into our minds when creating this podcast. This has been in the makings for 5 years now. And, there's so many places that this podcast could go, but there's so many things that we have to accomplish and so many things we have to overcome when making this podcast. So first off, I really want to start off by thanking numerous people. There's no doubt that these people played a huge factor in my life. And to them, I wouldn't be where I am today. First, want to start off by thanking my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, who always has my back. And I especially want to thank my best friend, my executive producer, Brandon Trevino. And it's safe to say that I really wouldn't be where I'm at today had it not been for these core people in my life. I mean, there's so many more people that I'm thankful for. If I don't mention you, I apologize. Please don't get offended. I just, the list could go on and on and on. So I want to start off by kind of getting into my background, telling you where I'm at, and then go into the kind of like the goals for the podcast and what we're trying to accomplish here. So originally I'm from El Paso, Texas, born and raised. I was there for 18 years. Throughout my whole life, I've played competitive baseball. My dad was always my coach. And that kind of gave me the structure for who I became and where I'm at right now. But that wasn't everything. I got into high school, and in high school I joined almost every extracurricular activity that you could possibly think of. I mean, I was an FBLA, BPA, NHS, debate. Like, I was a jock nerd, needless to say. And high school was a wild ride, still playing baseball, had a great time. And when I was 18 years old, graduating high school, I went on a road trip, kind of took a look at some colleges, nailed it down to UT Austin and UTSA. And I kind of fell in love with UTSA. I fell in love with the city. I fell in love with the people. And to this day, I would arguably say that was the better choice for me, personally. I think that I'm home. I will always be grateful for El Paso and where I came from, but San Antonio just, it feels home to me. I know that this is where I belong. So I came to UTSA. I graduated in 4.5 years. While I was at UTSA, I had joined a fraternity. I'll go a little bit more into that depth. I'll go more in depth here in a little bit as to kind of how that played out. But I joined a fraternity, did that for 4.5 years, and then I graduated with my bachelor's in business marketing. At the time, I was bartending, and I loved bartending. I loved what I did. I had that itch that I needed to do a little bit more. There's nothing against bartending. I think bartending is a great profession. I just know that I wanted to do more. And one day I just up and quit, not knowing what I was going to do. At that time, I didn't have 2 dimes to rub together. I mean, I was broke as a joke. And I remember driving home, not knowing what I was going to do, scared out of my mind, and I called my mom. And my mom's always played a huge factor in my life. She's always kind of guided me and steered me in the right direction. So I called her. I told her, hey, you know what? I quit. I have no idea what I'm going to do. At this time, I already had my degree. And real estate had always been in the back of my mind. That's kind of the route that I wanted to go. But I don't know that I was at that time. I don't know that I was ready to go into real estate. I mean, real estate takes a huge investment. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I know I wanted to do some type of sales, and she just kind of blurted out. She goes, "Well, why don't you try car sales?" And we had talked about it for a little bit, and I was like, you know what, let me try it out. So I went home, got dressed up, walked into the first dealership that I knew of, which was right around the corner from where I lived, and I applied and got the job on the spot. It that right there was definitely a turning point in my life, and it kind of shifted my focus as from being a boy to turning into a man. And there was obviously so much more that I had to get better at and master my craft, but that was definitely the turning point for sure. I started at that dealership. I had worked there for 4.5 years, almost 5 years. And then I transferred over to a new company where I'm currently at, and now I'm running a dealership. Got a sales team that I'm super thankful for. These guys bust their butt every day. But this podcast really isn't going to be about, or solely about, sales. This podcast is really going to be about life in general. I mean, my goal is to be as broad as I possibly can with some specifics, so that way everybody can benefit from this. So I kind of want to take a step back and, go over when I had just moved to San Antonio. And the reason I think that's so important is because when I had just moved to San Antonio, I mean, it was new to me. I was, for the first time in my life, by myself, had no idea what I was doing, trying to figure out life. And I hit some really, really low times. And I think it's very important, to talk about those low times, especially here on this podcast. I mean, the name of the podcast is Candid with Candia. So that's the goal. The goal is to be as candid as possible. I'm going to be open. I'm going to talk about my failures. I'm going to talk about the hard times. I'm going to talk about what my rock bottom looks like. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if I can help one person from this podcast, the people that we bring on this podcast, and share the insight as to how to avoid those failures, then I've done my job. I'll be happy. I'll be content with that. And I think that's very important to know, because I'm not doing this for the fame. I'm not doing this because, I want to get rich quick kind of thing. It's hard. Life is hard. And knowing that other people have gone through what you're going through and have gotten out of that area is definitely important to know. So I want to go back, and I kind of want to talk about how I just moved to San Antonio, because growing up, I was, for the most part, I was a really happy kid. I mean, I had two loving parents who did absolutely everything they could for me. Me and my brother fought almost every day, but now, we're like best friends. I guess that's kind of how a lot of people turn out. But, it was a very normal childhood. Looking back now I can see how broke we were. But at the time, I never really saw it, and it kind of puts my mind in a perspective as to how much my parents did for me and my brother. And so growing up, I was happy, happy-go-lucky kid, playing baseball, doing what I love. And I moved to San Antonio. Moving to San Antonio initially was a lot of fun. It was new. It was different, to say the least. And I didn't know what to expect. So when I moved out here, I did a whole semester, and I was at that time in a long distance relationship with my high school sweetheart. Turns out that didn't work out. But before that didn't work out, I know I missed her a lot. I missed my family a lot. I miss my friends a lot. So after the first semester, I was miserable. I wanted to go home. I remember going back in December and telling my parents I don't want to go back to San Antonio. I don't want to go to UTSA. I'll finish school here at UTEP. I promise I'll get my degree. I was kind of promising the world, and my father wouldn't let me, and I thought that was really, really disappointing. He wouldn't take no for an answer. I was gonna move back to San Antonio, and that's the way it was. And I was angry. I was upset. It's not what I wanted to do. But fast forward 2-3 years, and now, I mean, I've been here 12 years now, but fast forward about 2-3 years, and that at that time I was thankful that he didn't let me go back home. Don't know that I'd be where I'm at right now had I stayed in El Paso. I mean, there's nothing against El Paso. Don't get me wrong. I love El Paso. I think it's a beautiful city, beautiful people, wonderful food, but definitely not home for me. I miss my family every day, but I don't regret that decision one bit. And I'm so thankful for my dad forcing me to stay over here. So I stayed over here. That January, I had already knew a couple of guys that were in that fraternity, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna rush a fraternity. Joined, got in, fit in perfectly, and that was kind of my saving grace. I felt that was the first time I felt a part of something. I felt like I had a family. I felt at home, and from there, my feelings of wanting to go back home kind of faded away. And then, a couple years down the line, my high school sweetheart and I broke up, and that was really devastating. And the reason that's so important as far as my life goes is I wouldn't say that's the sole factor of my rock bottom, but it was definitely a huge contributor to that. We broke up, and it was rough, but I was still that happy-go-lucky kid. I was having fun, hanging out with my friends, but I wasn't getting anywhere with my life, and it was hard. It was hard because I didn't know what was right from wrong. I didn't know what was up from down, and I felt like I was going down a path that I definitely didn't need to go down. And I remember this was back in 2013, 2014, roughly around there. I started getting like these weird feelings, and it's hard to put into words. It really is. I started becoming a real germaphobe. I mean, I've always been clean, but it was severe, and I had no idea what was going on. I was washing doorknobs. I was washing the kitchen 3-4 times a day. Every time at night it was miserable. I would stay in the bathroom for hours, and that's not an over exaggeration. I would stay in the bathroom for hours, cleaning the countertops, cleaning everything that could possibly be touched in the bathroom. And I mean, you could eat off the floors in there, but I don't know where that came from. I really don't know. So I kind of lived with it for a while, and from there I spiraled into a really deep depression, and that was a really hard time. I remember there was times where I would stay in my room, lay down in my bed, and nobody could get me out of that bedroom. I mean, I would black out the room, I would watch Netflix, and I would stay in there all day, all night for numerous days. Didn't talk to anybody. And I was so confused because this was something so new to me. And I don't know, to this day, I don't know the science behind it. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I just know that I was going through it. And there were so many people that were trying to be supportive. You know, my mom, my dad, my brother, friends, family, like everybody was trying so hard to be supportive, but it felt like no matter what happened, no matter what anybody said, it was just, it was rough. It was rough. No matter what they said, there was no escaping it. And I guess the best way to really talk about this situation or explain how I was feeling at that time was I felt like a rabid animal caught in a corner, and there's like three people surrounding you, and there's no way out. Like, what else are you gonna do? You're gonna either curl up or you're gonna fight your way out. And at that time, I didn't think there was a fighting to go. Like, I didn't think there was a fight in me. I didn't see the reason to kind of push forward. I didn't see the future. There was no future for me. I don't know why I was thinking this. I can't explain that enough, because I know there's people out there that have been happy their whole life and then just out of nowhere just kind of get hit with that depression and anxiety, and it's not fun, especially when you're not used to it. I mean, even if you are used to it, it's still not fun. But when you don't understand what's going on and you don't know what's going on, it's scary. So by this time, my mom had came out to San Antonio. She knew something wasn't right, so she was like, "Let's go talk to a psychiatrist or psychologist or a therapist." I don't know the difference between all three, quite frankly. But I talked to one of those guys, and at that moment, I got diagnosed with. I'm trying to remember. This was so long ago. I got diagnosed with depression, with anxiety psychosis, and obsessive compulsive disorder, and I got put on medication. You know, it's important to know that even with the medication, things tended to get a little bit better. Um, but I definitely wouldn't say it was 100%. And I still, at this point, just didn't know what to do. Like, it was tiring. I would go to work, and I remember, like, I guess this was the OCD. I would go to work and I would keep my arms to the side, you know, um, so I wouldn't touch anybody else or touch anything. And it was miserable. And every single time I got home from work or I got home from on a day out, I was exhausted. And I wasn't physically exhausted. I was mentally exhausted. Like, the fight that you're fighting in your brain all day it's rough. And I can't sit here and say that people weren't there for me. I mean, there's one story. I say it a lot. I'm very open about it because I like other people to know and learn from my experiences. But I say this story a lot because it really means a lot to me. I mean, Brandon hears this story all the time, but I remember one time we're in his garage. You remember this? And we're having a great time. I think we're playing beer pong or something, and we're just, relaxing, having a good night. And my ex at that time pulls up. She starts walking up with her friends, and I don't know why, but it was just a reaction. I literally put like my arms up, and Brandon, being the best friend that he is so gently puts my arms down, and he goes, "Hey, it's all right, man. Like, just don't worry about it." And that right there is probably the most heartfelt moment that I think I've had with him, even though we've had a lot. But just knowing someone's in my corner, understanding of what I'm going through, was definitely helpful. But I can honestly say it still wasn't enough. I mean, I remember numerous nights just laying down and contemplating suicide. I mean, never attempted, but just contemplating it and wondering if it's worth it, Like, what's the point? And at that moment, I always told myself that I wouldn't be that type of person. I couldn't do it. But when those thoughts ran through my mind, I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what was left for me. And I knew at that point that was my rock bottom. And I had two choices. And one of them was to give up. So, with that being said, I'm still here. So, I clearly took the second choice, and it was to fight through. Continue taking the medication, continue fighting. Slowed down heavily on my drinking. It was bad at that time. I was drinking a 12-pack a night, and it just wasn't a fun time. I was never 100%, like feeling 100%. I wasn't going to the gym because every day I was hungover, going into work, bartending, and it wasn't a fun time. It was not a fun time. So I knew something had to change. I started working out again. I started eating better. I wasn't necessarily on a diet, but wasn't eating McDonald's every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I wasn't drinking. I probably kept my drinking to the weekends, and which at that time was a big thing for me. So one thing that I realized was, as I'm making these changes in my life, things started to look a little bit better. I'm not saying everything was perfect the second I started doing that stuff. That's not what I'm saying at all. But things definitely started to get a little bit brighter. And I read something the other day that actually really stuck out to me is, if you're going to quit bad habits, you have to replace them with good ones. So that's what I started doing. And, the gym was kind of like an outlet to me. I started playing softball again. And like I said, I've always been a baseball player. So playing competitive softball definitely kind of relieved that stress for me. And I started finding things that were making me happy and giving me that escape. And I can say that once I started figuring out the formula to, okay, I feel a little bit better, I'm going to multiply that. And I thank God every day that I didn't go down the road of, drugs or, something that would be a temporary fix. And I think that has a lot to do with my upbringing. I think that has a lot to do with kind of my background, is that was never a part of my life. My life was surrounded by God. I grew up in a Christian household. I grew up in a Christian elementary school. I grew up in the church. My father and mother were God-fearing people. I'd never seen my dad take a sip of alcohol. Same thing with my mom, but none of the stuff that I did when I came to college was taught growing up. It was definitely something that I learned out here. But the point I'm trying to make is, I could have gone a completely different route. I could have taken a completely different path. And I could have gone down the road of, I'm going to take some drugs and feel happy temporarily, or I'm going to start replacing them with better habits. And like I said, I'm not here to preach to anybody. I'm not here to say, this is what I did, do it and you'll feel better. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. That's not the point of this. I'm just letting you know what worked for me. And if this is something that you're going through or have gone through, try it. There's no harm in it. That's the good thing about that route, is that there was no harm in it. So things started getting a little bit better. I got into the car business, changed my career path, and I kind of stated this earlier, that was kind of like the changing point in my life. Every day I was waking up at noon, 1 o'clock, doing whatever I needed to do, and then started getting ready for work, getting out at 2, 3 in the morning, which is what's standard for a bartender. When I switched professions, I started selling cars, I had to be up at 7 in the morning, and this was new to me. I had no idea what I was going to do. I remember my very first day of work, I begged my girlfriend at the time. I was like, please, please, please wake me up. Like, I know I'm not going to be able to hear my alarm, and I really need this job. Like, I need to make this work. And I went, and I did what I needed to do. So I joined the car business, and I fit right in. I mean, it was like I was destined to do that my whole life. I just never knew it. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I was a professional right off the bat. It definitely took a whole year for me to kind of get the hang of things and figure out what it is to be successful in the car business. And I remember after that first year, I mean, I was making decent money. I was making a little bit more than I was bartending, but I was working significantly more. I was working 10, 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and I was not used to that. Didn't like it at all when I first started. And I remember thinking, I started in May. The January of next year, I had a horrible, horrible January. And I realized this might not be for me. And I remember calling my mom, telling her, look, I'm not going to do the car business. I don't think I'm cut out for it. I don't like it. And she gave me a wonderful piece of advice that to this day still sticks with me. She told me that's fine. I completely understand if you're going to quit the car business, but give it one more month. And when you give it one more month, give it everything you have. And that little piece of advice is what led me to where I'm at today. And the reason that was the best piece of advice I could have ever received is because I never would have been able to see my true potential. I never would have been able to see what it is that I can actually accomplish. And to this date, as a salesman goes, until before I was promoted to sales manager, that February was the best month I ever had in sales. And it kind of proved a point to me that if I just give it my all, if I do everything I possibly can and burn my ships, right? That was my mentality that whole month is, I'm not giving up. I'm going to do what it is I need to do to be successful at this. It works. And, I had a really good month, but then the next month I kind of fell off again. And I was like, okay, I know that February I'm able to do what I need to do in order to sell cars. I know what I need to do in order to be successful. But I need to master my craft. I need to get better. So at that time, I really didn't have any mentorship. I didn't know how to get better. I just knew I needed to bust my ass, really. So at that time, there was 2 guys that were in finance that weren't directly my superiors, but they were superiors to me, if that makes sense. They weren't directly my managers, I should say. And I remember every time I would lose a car sale, I would race back to their office and I would do like a play-by-play. I'd be like, okay, I said this and the customer said this and I really didn't know how to respond, so I said this. What should I have done in that situation? And they would give me all the ammunition that I needed. So I've always been really good at learning from my mistakes. And every time I would hear that same objection again, I'd be like, oh, I know exactly how to overcome this. Like, this is what they told me, and it would work. And then from there, I would just start scaling, and one year was better than the previous year. The year after that was better than that year, and it just started scaling. And these 2 guys really took me under their wing, and that meant a lot to me. That they saw something in me that a lot of other people kind of didn't pay attention to. So I was able to get promoted, and at that time, he's kind of like a father figure to me in the car business. Mark had moved to another dealership. I was really devastated. And a couple months after that, he actually really started pressuring me into kind of coming and joining me, or me joining him. And I did. And I don't regret it one bit. I look up to him a lot. You know, he's taken me under his wing, and he's kind of guided me into the person I am in the car business. And that really, really hits home with me because I needed someone like that. I needed someone to kind of be there for me and guide me and mentor me into the person I was professionally. Like I said before, I mean, this podcast isn't going to be about car sales. I mean, some of it will be. Like there's definitely going to be some people that I bring on here that are going to have some expertise in the podcast. Some of the people that I bring on here are going to be athletes, business owners. Like there's so many people that have already been reaching out to us to be on the podcast, and I'm very excited for that. You know, we're very excited for that. But I don't want it to just be about one simple thing. I want it to be so diverse to where everybody can kind of get a little snippet from each episode. If you're not a business professional, that's fine. If you're a bartender, that's fine. If you're in the health field, that's fine. Like, there's going to be so much talked about in this podcast that's going to help multiple people no matter what profession you're in, no matter what part of life you're in. You know, something that we like to focus on is not necessarily, oh, look at me, I've made it. It's, I'm busting my ass to get to where I am, but there's so much more. And I want to bring on people. I want to talk to people. I want to mentor people, and I want to help people who have that same mentality, who have that same mindset. I want to be able to prove to people, hey, you know what? I know you're going through something right now. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, but there's other options and other avenues that you can take in life that will definitely help you out. And it's not going to be easy. You know, this podcast, there's been so many speed bumps, so many roadblocks, and that's the same thing with everything in life. I mean, every time we try to film something, or every time we try to do something different, or every time we try to do something with a podcast, something always kind of gets thrown our way. And, you know, I talk a lot about this, especially on social media. You know, it seems like every time you're on the verge of greatness, things tend to get significantly harder. And you can do one of two things. Down when I was at my worst, when I was feeling the worst I could ever possibly feel. I don't ever think I'll ever feel worse than that point. I could have done one of two things. I could have quit, or I could have kept pushing. And I'm so thankful that I did, because now I'm happier than ever. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like my life is perfect. I mean, my life is rough. But if the things that I'm going through right now happened to me 6-7 years ago, I would have quit the car business. I would have quit sales. I never would have done this podcast. I never would post on my social media, content on social media. I wouldn't be doing the stuff that I'm still doing. I mean, I've had a freaking breakdown a couple weeks ago, and that would have lasted me all week, if not all month. And I wouldn't have wanted to do anything. I wouldn't have wanted to keep pushing forward. Instead, that breakdown and me feeling sorry for myself lasted an hour. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. That's it. I'm going to continue what I need to do. But that doesn't happen overnight. To some people, it does. And more power to them. That's awesome. That is a great trait to have. Some people have to work at it. And that's what I want to help out with. You know, I just kind of want to say this one more time. It's not me saying, look at me, I've made it. It's, I've been there, bro. I've been there. I know what it feels like. But trust me, it feels so much better getting out of it. And this is what helped me. If it helps you, great. So with that being said, there's so much more we have to talk about in this podcast. I mean, I have so many goals for the direction of this podcast and what we want to accomplish. But I can't do it. We can't do it without the help of and the support from you guys. I really do appreciate the love and the support. I mentioned everywhere I go, I always mention I'm a car salesman. I run a dealership, so that way, people buy from me. Now with the podcast, we've been working on this podcast for months, and everywhere I go, it's like, oh, check it out. We did this, we got the backdrop, we got this. Brandon's kicking ass. I'm coming up with content. I'm getting these people, and the love and support that everybody has given me, I'm so thankful for that. From the bottom of my heart, I can't thank you enough. If you guys love this content, if you guys want to see more, if this is something that intrigues you or something that might even be able to help you, let us know. Reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you guys out. We're more than happy to hear from you guys and learn from you guys as well. All of these people that we're going to bring on the podcast, the reason I'm bringing them on is so I can learn from them. What are you doing that got you to the point you're at right now? And what are you doing to stay motivated, stay disciplined, and move forward? Make sure you guys follow us on social media, Candid with Candia. We've got TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and Instagram. Like I said, I really do appreciate you guys. That's a wrap for the very first episode of Candid with Candia.